Hello and welcome to the Business of the Business podcast. I am your host, JP Champaz for the two-man power. Joining me is my co-host himself, Mr. Trump Mania, the financial wrestling genius himself, Mr. Lavie Margolin. Lavie, how you doing today, sir?
Hey John, I'm doing well. I'm not sure, depending on when people are listening, if this is the holiday edition or this is the New Year's edition. Maybe depends on if you're streaming on YouTube or listening on the podcast. But as we're recording this, a monumentous night. As I found out recently, our sons are in the same grade. So experiencing wrestling probably about the first time.
Yeah, he's watched it on TV, obviously, and he's seen a bunch of stuff, and he's watched some of the old stuff, watched some of the new stuff, but this was his first ever live event. It's his first show that he's ever been to.
So I'd love to get those thoughts down first, because I think that first experience is eye opening. So my son had a lot of good comments. The first was when we were passing the merchandise stand. The first thing that caught his eye were the $600 belts, and
Yes.
he was like, who would pay $600 for a belt? And then he had a funny line later. He's like, they don't wear shirts, so why do they need belts? But he knew he was being funny with that one. Alexa Bliss was somebody that he wanted to see her matches this morning. The wrestler he was familiar, or actually two wrestlers he was familiar with, I let him know in advance that they wouldn't be there. Bianca Belair and Jake Paul. This morning he wanted to see Bianca Belair's entrance, at least, if not her full match. And he didn't say to me, I want better seats next time. He said, next time I want to see a smaller show. So our seats are better. So he wasn't criticizing it, but he wanted a different experience next time. So I took that as a good sign that he wanted to return. How about for you?
So we were in obviously the opposite side, but we were in the 200s as well. He didn't really complain about the seats. He liked it. He had good sight lines, good vision, but he said, next time I want to go closer. I want to be more towards the first row. And I said, I don't know if you understand how much those tickets go for now. But it's just wrestling. It can't be that much. Like, no, it's insanely priced. And it's funny with the merch too, because he looked at the WWE, the World Heavyweight title, Gunther's title. And he goes, oh, I want that. How much is that? I said, oh, 600. No way. But there was the mini one, the $35 one right underneath it. He goes, can I get that one? I said, yes. So he got the mini belt, and for some reason he really wanted that gigantic chain. I don't know why. Did you see that? That's like a little WWE plate with a gigantic plastic chain. He really wanted that for some reason. I don't know why, but yeah.
Is that like a John Cena thing, or it's like independent?
So I would think because of the chain, it's John Cena, but it just says WWE, so it's just a generic WWE item. So just weird and random, but he wanted it for some reason, so of course had to get it. But yeah, he was very interested in for some reason Jey Uso he was hoping was on the show. That's the guy he was really looking forward to. He thought John Cena was retired. I had to tell him not yet. He will be retiring in 2025, but he was interested in some of the Cena stuff going on. He said, I don't think The Rock is going to be here, but I'd like to go to a show The Rock was on. I said, wow, okay. Might be a WrestleMania. But he said when the tickets were launched for the March show, which we'll talk about in a little bit, he goes, Dad, we got to go back. So he was really, really into it. His favorite wrestler, CM Punk, of all guys. CM Punk.
Nice. It's interesting, like when WWE is marketed as a brand, especially like when there's a family appeal, which is basically during their periods when they've been most successful, obviously outside of the Attitude Era. But there's certain expectations, sort of like Disney on Ice, that you have a consistent set of characters and they're going to deliver them. So WWE doesn't market as much to be like, okay, this is the matches that'll be on there. Although I did see a lot of advertising like trying to emphasize the matches, but when parents buy tickets or kids are interested, they're not thinking that there wasn't a Cody Rhodes, there was no Usos, there was no Rhea Ripley, and so on, especially when you have a split show like that.
It is interesting that they went that route because remember last year Cody was on. I mean, they really loaded up the card last year. It was the return of Punk to MSG. So, and we'll get into it. Obviously, the ticket sales too, which was I just think that's kind of why there was more ticket sales last year. But they split the baby. They had 6 or 7 thousand people down in Jacksonville, but that's where Cody Rhodes was. That's where Jacob Fatu and the Usos were, and they kind of split it up that way. Kind of an interesting thought process by them. I thought to kind of do that, split it up that way instead of maybe having it somewhere closer where you can maybe do a show where Cody's on 2 shows that day or something along those lines. But hey, pretty successful show, I think. And if you think about it, the WWE itself got a pretty good roster. If you think about it, because you had Gunther, you had Damian Priest, CM Punk, Seth Rollins, Dominic, LA Knight. I mean, pretty good card to be able to kind of balance 2 shows on one night.
Yeah, like one of the things that I was not surprised about, because I know all the talent, but again, people know I don't have my finger on the pulse of things, that how many talents were like so over. Sometimes I remember it was probably 2021, that show that drew 6,500 or something like that, according to WrestleTix, post-pandemic, that a lot of the show was boring because the fans weren't into it, and there wasn't a lot of talent that felt over at the time, or at least that were on the show, actually. I think it was a split show where it felt like the better talent were whatever other town. But just looking at the card here, LA Knight was so over. Xavier Woods, the New Day act, and Otis, like, people were into that. My son was like talking about him. He had never heard of him or seen any matches. It was just like a curiosity. The Braun Breaker Sami Zayn feud was like, especially for people that are there for the wrestling, like that really stood out. My son was a little bit like, okay, they're both good guys. What's going on? Why are they wrestling each other? Seth Rollins and Dominic Mysterio, obviously both huge stars. The Punk Kaiser match was great. I mean, hindsight 2020, maybe they should have put that on last. I know that they had the angle, although I'll have to find out from you, John, if you were out the building already by the time Punk came out. I was out the building.
Yes.
But
yes.
Maybe that's why it made sense. The one, and this isn't really criticism. You have to like cool down a little bit, and not everyone it can be like the top star. The Wyatt Sicko's, the entrance obviously is very over. You didn't have the main Sicko. But Nikki Cross, I love her, like her outfit. Obviously, it's been around a while, but I just haven't seen it before. The First Testament with Karrion Kross, I feel like every year I see Cross, like it seems like they're trying to get somewhere, but not necessarily getting anywhere. I don't want to like shade him too much because I know he has a book coming out from ECW Press, and maybe in a few months we'll be able to get him on this show. I like him. It just seems like they're kind of always trying to find like where does he fit in, and I always like the Age of Apocalypse people and so on, but like they're still trying to find their thing. The Liv Morgan, Sky match was very engaging. For me, like I might have just been done. The Gunther thing, like I know they're trying to stay away from it, but like to me, like I'm Jewish, right? It's like it does feel very German. I'm not gonna give the N word because I know that they're not going for that. Don't want to make it sound nice, but it's a little awkward to me. But also like it's like a secondary belt. I mean, and like interestingly though, to me, John, like Damian Priest, like he was never my favorite because I just remember him being like a little dull from Ring of Honor. No shade intended, but like that was just like my impression of him. I know he's grown a lot, right? Like I have some of these issues being like a Laugh fan, but like he wasn't over in New York as much as I would think. Like when you say New York and he's wearing Puerto Rico colors, like that's the fan base has changed, but that was always like a big thing. Like if you represent that in New York, I was just surprised that wasn't probably of all the surprises of the night that match wasn't like as engaging.
The truth here about why Punk wasn't the main event, and here's the psychology behind it, which I learned many years ago. So sometimes you put on the biggest star in the intermission main event, which Punk versus Kaiser was, because remember they had the match and then they go to intermission. So the intermission main event, what does that do? You're so pumped, you're so excited, you just saw the big star, you just saw CM Punk. Go to the merch stand. We tried to go to the merch stand. It was even more packed than when we first got there. So that psychology definitely worked because everybody went. they went to get their Punk stuff and everything else, and boom, as we're leaving, the merchandise stand is sold out. So that's the psychology behind it. Same thing when I saw a couple other house shows and Cody Rhodes was the intermission main event. I was like, wow, very, very wise move to do that. And I know they used to do Hogan a lot, and obviously Hogan wanted to travel to the next town too. But that's like part of the psychology of it is getting them back to the merch stand, getting you super excited. You just saw the big star, which obviously did happen with my son too. But then it was like, yeah, we'll go back. Maybe at the end we'll try to get some more merch. And then it was kind of completely sold out.
Were people leaving during the main event in your section also?
A little bit, yeah, more towards the end part. I think trying to beat the traffic. We did leave a little bit early too, just to try to beat the traffic and get him home at like he's 9, so get him home at a reasonable time. So because we had about an hour plus drive home back to Jersey.
So, WrestleTix had a very interesting summary. I'm a Patreon subscriber. So, we can't look at 2024 in any sense in terms of finality yet, but just to see like what it looks like. So in 2021, they averaged 5,347. 2022, this is for like all their holiday shows. We can look at the Garden, but 2022, 7,154. 2023, 9,704. This year so far is 7,953. So obviously, like, just the first 2 shows occurred as we're recording this. The average could go up, maybe even up to like 1,000, depending on the markets that they're looking at. But let's look at the Garden. So this year, 12,700. Last year, 15,831. 2022, 11,301. And 2021, what was that? It's hard to see, 5,838 or maybe 6,838. So it's probably 6. So was last year better than this year? So we talked about, right, like Punk and so on. So I think for the most part, I think it was the ticket prices that I think they probably made more money this year. And that's obviously better for their bottom line. And that's the most important thing to them. But you miss out on something if like as many like mainstream fans can come, because maybe we were each a little bit careful for the Christmas and the Hanukkah gifts or whatever, and there's still room to buy tickets, but not everyone is in that situation. And I think that's the challenge of like making every event a premium event, not necessarily the pay-per-view but like every event is like maximized, expensive prices. You don't have these house shows hitting everywhere. The challenge of that is that you're not going to necessarily build up as many grassroots fans as possible.
I do think last year the return of Punk, though, because remember they kept adding tickets on when all of a sudden he gets added, they sell 4,000 more tickets. It shot way up when it was the return of Punk. It was his first match back in WWE in 10 years, his first match in the Garden, and God knows how long. So that definitely helped. Although last year was pretty loaded. Seth versus Drew, Cody versus Nakamura, Ricochet, of course, was on there against Bronson Reed, Punk's return versus Dominic, Sammy and Jay versus the Judgment Day. Surprise appearance from Omos. So pretty loaded. Obviously, Becky Lynch has her fans. Rhea Ripley was on last year. So it was kind of pretty stacked last year for sure. But I was pleasantly surprised. I really enjoyed this year's show. I thought it was rather good. And the end was quite funny if everybody caught it online, which with Punk showing up. Obviously, he was in, quote unquote in the shower, came out in a bath towel and attacked Ludwig Kaiser and Dominic Mysterio.
You would think I learned my lesson not to leave early. I actually missed the curtain call.
Wow. Oh my God.
Yeah. Shawn Michaels won. Like, let's go, with my dad. Let's get the Metro North home. But at that point I was kind of toasted, but they did, like, as you mentioned, John, announced a return on Monday night. I don't think that will be viable to bring my son, depending on my own schedule. I'm definitely open to it, but there's just something about the holiday show, even though like a couple of them have been boring that I've gone to. I've been at most of them, like in this, I guess you would say like modern era. What is it? The last like 15 years. It's just something fun. Not that there's so many house shows anymore, but like it always stood out far and above that. And even if I didn't always bring my own family, it was like a nice, like, different sort of environment, a little bit like retro, that you have like fun for the whole family type of thing.
when that show is going to happen, who knows if Cena and maybe The Rock possibly on that show too. So it could be an expensive ticket in town, that's for sure. But my son already, he's like, "Oh, where need I go?" And yeah, I was ready to mention it to my wife, and she's like, "I don't know. Hold your horses on that one." So we'll see.
I feel like in New Jersey, like it's just like so accessible to like go to like the independent shows and so on. Of course, your friend Crowbar and so on, like
Yep.
really talents that you know of and like up and comers. Like, do you think he'd be interested in that, or he's more like, okay, these names I recognize from TV, that's like not for me?
I don't know. I haven't really thought about it. Maybe I will bring him to a closer indie show and see if he enjoys it. I feel like he enjoyed it so much because I'm like, hey, it's the world's most famous arena, and CM Punk and like guys he knew were on it, and he's so loud, and so the video screens and stuff. So I know I might have spoiled him with taking him to the biggest arena of all time for his first WWE show.
See, the challenge where I am, and it doesn't mean that I can travel to New Jersey, just in my mind, like it's hard for me to like cross borders or whatever, but like there's not a lot of like small shows that are convenient to me. Like when they've happened, I've gone, like there was once, like it was like 5 blocks from my house, like a church down the hill, and I was like, oh, that's awesome. It was like an hour and a half, like never heard of the guys. They were just like great fun being like in the front row, but like where I am, you have to go to like Queens or Brooklyn or whatever it may be. And I can't really take him to like a GCW show.
Right. And it's funny, if I just looked, GCW was in the house last night. Brad and Sean Rossap and Emil J and a bunch of the guys, and I think Nick Gage, they were in the suite at MSG last night, so they were enjoying the show.
Yeah, I have some notes about that in the GCW section.
Okay, we'll discuss. Let's talk about AEW though. What's going on with their Christmas?
So John, we've been talking about for weeks, like, will we go? Will we not go? To what show will we go? And I looked up the Christmas Collision show on Ticketmaster, and I was like, for second row, not a bad price. I was like, let me just go. So I guess the best way to say it is I enjoyed it, but I was full. Meaning, and I'm not comparing the two groups at the time or whatever it may be, but like, John, I don't know if you remember when TNA like had to move to Pop TV, and they were having their premiere. It was in the Manhattan Center, and Bobby Lashley was one of the stars of the show. So I went, and it was fine, and I was like, I'm full. Like, I have no desire to go to TNA again. For AEW, I would probably go if like a pay-per-view or premium live event was close, but I'm not sure if I have any desire to go to like a television taping or something untelevised if they do that again. It was just it was what it was. Like I enjoyed it. Interestingly, with the setup of the second row, I've never felt so far in the second row. As they really extended out. Like it's not like around the ring, it's more like it's further past the ring. I'm not sure if it came across on TV, but there's a lot of space between the ring and the fans. I felt like more than other promotions. Now there was Ring of Honor stuff to open it up, which was fine, and I didn't stay long for the Ring of Honor stuff afterwards. So I'm just going to talk about the matches at the Christmas Collision show, which actually did a really good rating. I think 650,000, like their best rating in more than a year, maybe a year and a half. So Ricochet, Will Ospreay. So that was, really great match, obviously, given the talents. I haven't seen Ricochet that up close since Evolve in Brooklyn at the Lyceum, so that was cool. Will Ospreay, obviously, who am I to like criticize what he does, whatever. Something about like wearing the jersey, it just doesn't like fit as much for me, but that might fit his character, sort of like being British and everyone's like a soccer fan, I guess. Chris Statlander, Penelope Ford, that was just there for me. Daniel Garcia defeated Shelton Benjamin. That was great. Like Shelton Benjamin was like the most engaging to me is like more than 20 years. Like I loved like this act, and like everyone was like chanting the whole match. He likes to hurt people. He likes to hurt people. So Mark Briscoe defeats Beast Morris. The match was fine, but a really special moment for me just to observe was that the whole Briscoe family, not the whole necessarily, but like the extended Briscoe family. I'm assuming, his children and obviously his sister-in-law and their children. And I believe it was Papa Briscoe, but I didn't want to like go over and bother him or whatever. Like they just came up like from like under the main stage as like, like sort of like a waiting area or whatever. So like people would come up and down from there, and that's where I had been positioned. So it was like really cool to like see them watching the match. And I was kind of like, I saw these kids and I was like, I kind of recognize them. Like, where do I recognize them from? Like, from their different appearances, of course. But like, he came over and like hugged some of them like over the guardrail and stuff. And I was like, oh, okay, yes, my theory is correct. So that was really cool to see. The Claudio Castagnoli Darby Allin match, like, to me, it was sort of like more there. Like, there was like, I think Darby had climbed the top and jumped off or whatever. Like, it just happened so fast. So obviously on television, I think this all came across great. Like, everyone's been like raving about it. Smart for them to do. Just like in terms, it was sold out. Just like in terms of where I am as a fan, I got to see AEW. Thank you. And like, I'm not like dying for them, to come back.
Hey, I'm with you on that one. Makes sense. As far as GCW is concerned, what is going on? What is the latest for GCW? And are you maybe going to go back to the Hammerstein for GCW?
Yes. So I have a ticket for GCW. When I bought it, and I'm not disappointed that I did, right? But like, there's some of the Jericho stuff, and we'll get into like how good AEW is at sharing, which we know sometimes. But I was like, maybe there's something happening here in a crossover and so on. But as of December 26th, they moved 861 tickets. So it was about 45 since 6 days ago. So this includes like Brett freezing himself outside the Manhattan Center to distribute tickets. And it was, John, it was really, really cold out there. So I went over to Brett and said hello. I got a flyer. So I don't know what the story was, and I was trying to be like a little TMZ-ish, but then I was just like, it's too cold. Like, there was a guy that was like bothering Brett, and like he had a flyer, but he like threw it down to the ground. I didn't get what the whole story was at that time. I don't know if it was like somebody that was an AEW loyalist that wasn't happy he was there, or something totally unrelated. But he's certainly doing the work. A little bit of like the first night, he actually had tickets because for the Ring of Honor one, because he had tweeted about that. But the second night, I think he was just there distributing tickets. And then, as you mentioned, John, he was in a box during the show for MSG, but he was out there. I didn't see him this time. I just saw the tweet distributing flyers there. So whatever he can do, again, like Nick Gage isn't on the card. John, I don't know. I don't want to speculate too much, but I haven't seen any clips of like his return matches at CZW. But like, just in the picture from Madison Square Garden, like, it didn't look like he was in the best circumstances right now. And I don't know what the interplay is of Brett, who's obviously still close to Nick, like sort of trying to protect him by not booking him, or it's just not the right fit, or whatever it may be. I'd love to like see some clips of his recent matches just to see like what position he's in. Obviously not making too many assumptions from a photo. I'm not, somebody sees a photo of me, like, what are they going to guess, how healthy I am? But like, it's just like, just trying to figure out what's going on exactly. Because if he was in the position, it would be a good time for him to return. But looking at their upcoming shows in Seattle on December 28th. So, the theme that I'm putting out here is one that's been continuing a while. It's been bumpy. Ticket sales are very slow. That's what it looks like. So they're going to Seattle, teaming up with Defy. This is sort of like a standalone show, but I think paired with Defy over the weekend. So a handful of actually some front row tickets together, a handful of those. Several in the third row still available there. Ridgefield Park. So this is New Year's Eve. So more than 10 tickets remain. Front row, second row, third row, of course, general admission. The Sorry Pal show on January 10th. Second row has 10 or more seats remaining, although the third row just has one ticket remaining. And then January 11th. So this show is in Columbus. Okay, so let me go back a little bit. The Sorry Pal show is in Rochester. So those had been doing really well, the first two shows, especially the first one. And then January 11th is the show in Columbus, Ohio. And that has 10 or more second row ringside remaining. Balcony Reserve just has 7 remaining.
As far as what's going on in TNA wrestling, what is the latest in TNA's world?
So looking ahead, or in 2025, depending on when you're listening, like their business will depend on like the following factors. The executive stability and leadership philosophy, like we've seen obviously over the last 18 months, a lot of different turnover in terms of leadership. I'm waiting for the new executive's profile to be put on their website. I haven't seen it, or at least in the last couple of days, be added, or his LinkedIn profile be updated. So I'm just waiting for that. So distribution, and we'll talk about their deal in Canada, but are they, or AEW even, going to be able to pick up or pursuing some of these markets in which WWE is coming off for Netflix? So that's a real opportunity for them, or is that just based on their connections in Canada, something that they were able to take advantage of? Live event draw, can the promotion sustain bigger venues? And we will see in a moment one piece of really good news and others that are more of a struggle. With talent, are they going to austerity, so try and save money, or will they spend money on free agents? Or, and this is a leap, and we'll get into WWE in a second, but could the WWE be sending them some talent to work there regularly? And the WWE relationship in whole, like, will they continue to benefit from visibility and gaining from talent? It seems like it's gotten a little bit quieter on that side most recently. So first, in terms of Slammiversary, the good news thus far, early good news, UBS Arena, Belmont Park. So myself included, or even leading the pack, was concerned about booking such a big venue. So first of all, they opened it up small to begin with 4,101. And within the first week or thereabouts, they moved 1,556 tickets. They're getting support from the venue, who's retweeting appearances by talent that have New York connections who are at the show wearing Islanders jerseys. We'll come back to the other events in a moment, but really the biggest news besides that of the week, TNA Wrestling has signed an exclusive multi-year agreement with Sportsnet to air its flagship weekly TV show, Impact, every Thursday in Canada on Sportsnet 360. Additional programming includes Explosion, TNA 860, and other TNA classics from the 20-year library. So that's a great get for them. And I think it would actually be smart for them to lean more on Canada rather than being like basically the US's third promotion. Canada's number one promotion, or Canada's professional wrestling promotion. And you can maybe balance these two things where in the US, you want to make it less appealing by making it seem like you're like sort of just Canadian, but in Canadian broadcasting and so on, and now that you have better leverage, that would be something smart to concentrate on. Now, looking at the ticket sales, the Gallon Center in LA, it's not so much of a ticket master map, so not something WrestleTix would easily capture, but they opened up about, I would say about 30% of the floor for the 10,000 seat venue. And in terms of the reserve seats, you still have plenty of front row remaining. Curtis Colwell Center. So this is the first show after the New Year break and all of that. They have a small reserve section. Tickets outside of the front row have certainly moved, but there are several tickets in the front row remaining together. San Antonio, the sections are sort of divided up. You have to click on each one, but the first row is pretty much gone, but there's second row tickets and beyond remaining. El Paso, that one looks like it's off to a nice start at the El Paso County Coliseum. And St. Joseph Arena, in the Kansas City market. That one's, they've moved some seats, but some first row and plenty of second row remaining. So I think it's going to be challenging for TNA in terms of these big venues. Although, pushing this Slammiversary show, they might far exceed anyone's expectations. It might just be the thing where, unless it is like one of their premier shows where people go out of their way to go, and maybe some people even travel a little bit from out of the market, for the standard television taping, it's a big stretch to try to fill a several thousand seat venue, or at least get it to a decent place for television.
So as far as New Japan Pro Wrestling is concerned, Gabe Kidd has a lot of interesting stuff going on.
Yeah, and I don't know much about him, but I like sort of like he's had these standout moments where he gives himself a lot of attention.
Yeah, big time.
So this could be a work or not, or it's probably like a little bit of both. But they to AEW, they aren't helping us. They take, and they don't give anything back. He has zero interest in signing with AEW, being Tony Khan's new toy, wrestling a few matches, then sitting and catering. Just a good and important point, like in terms of who they've worked with. So even let's say GCW, where they're not necessarily really working with them, but okay, you're allowed Jericho to be on the show, which is good for GCW. It sort of gives buzz, but it's sort of like just to promote their own thing and take the buzz back, but not give anything in return. With AAA, they didn't send much of the top talent at that time. CMLL, it might be a little bit more active, but with New Japan, their shows in the US are less special now. They don't draw as well now. They do the show in Seattle every year, but they don't brand it as a New Japan show. I wouldn't say it's not worth, it isn't worthwhile, because if New Japan just gets a fee, or there's some sort of split in ticket revenue from these shows that they do once a year in North America, I think it's worthwhile. But AEW seems to get more out of these things than give back, which when you're in that position, that's what you can do. And we obviously know the WWE has done that for years. And with Battle in the Valley in San Jose on January 11th, it felt like a long time ago, but now it's just 2 weeks out. Just 1,000 tickets distributed. So in this challenging environment, not bad. Now, again, one thing to look at is that in the days leading up to the show, like, do we start seeing like this acceleration, which feels like an outlier, like several hundred tickets moving a day and so on, then like it feels like they're taking things off the board rather than selling them. So that's just something to look at.
Now, as far as MLW is concerned, what's going on with MLW lately?
So 4 MLW shows on the books for 2025 at the moment, basically one a month. We haven't looked into their ticket sales in a little while. So Dallas, the NY Tex, arena, January 11th, Kingsland Coliseum. I don't think they opened up the whole venue because several rows in the back were in for sale, but what they have for sale is nearly gone. So that's going to look good on television. February 8th in Center Stage. So since it is Ticketmaster, WrestleTix had it 221 tickets distributed out of a setup of 772. So obviously a little while to go. That was what MLW had done. GCW had done just about in January. Obviously, we saw the Heels Have Eyes and TNA sell those out or nearly sell those shows out. The Battle Rides show in LA, still second and third row tickets remaining with sales here and there. Interestingly, on their website, there was like a vanity URL just for ticket sales. It doesn't click over to anything. It's a dead link, so you have to go and search for it independently. And return to Chicago, one of their strongest markets. The show is until April, so those usually end up doing fine. There's still first and second row tickets available for that.
And we will move on now to the NWA. A little bit of sad news to report. Rest in peace, Jack Stane, former NWA World Heavyweight Champion, only 48 years old. So horrible to hear that about Jack. Super nice guy. I had the opportunity to interview him three different times. What a nice guy. What a cool guy. Just obviously respects to his family. But, man, that was crazy to hear that and read that, because I'm looking at pictures online. I'm like, it's like, no way, can't be. And then I read he passed away. I was like, man, crazy, way too young.
Yeah, that was really surprising, especially just being a few years older than us. Did he have a tour with New Japan at some point? I feel like
Yeah. Yep.
That was a thing. So
yep.
Certainly, all over the world. But in terms of, the NWA shows on the books for 2025, Shockwave at the OC Theater, January 11th. That looks like maybe the third row is available now. So they moved the first couple of rows. Tampa, February 2nd for a taping in the small WEDU PBS studios there. So they should be able to move those small amount of tickets and return to Dothan. I feel like we've talked about Dothan Civic Center every week for a year, which is actually good because they've announced returns to a venue that does well for them. So curious to see how this one will move along. Just recently announced. So, and about 2.5 months, 3 months out. So we'll have to monitor the pickup, but like first row and a little bit of the second row moved thus far.
What are the most watched channels in 2024 according to IndieWire? This is going to get a little interesting here for sure.
Yeah, so looking at it, and interestingly, like IndieWire, it seemed, I didn't know exactly the math, but like I don't think they prioritize like P2 as much as others do. So like if you look, I think it's Variety also has like a list that's basically the same, but like you'll see some differences in terms of the average. So pick what you'd like, but basically it gives the same story. So just looking at like some of the wrestling centric channels. So BN Sports has been the last several years like at the bottom of the list, but there are some stations that don't rate, meaning either their parent doesn't pay for Nielsen rating, like I would imagine CBS Sports Network, or the ratings aren't high enough to average 1,000 or more viewers. So it's not a bad thing to be at the bottom, but the ratings are a struggle. So according to IndieWire, BN Sports averages 2,000 in prime time. BN Sports has been 4,000. So the many, like not many, but a couple of years ago when WrestleNomics had the numbers for MLW, it had been moved down to like around 2,500 viewers at some point. It was like a variance in the several thousands. Access TV at 131 has 23,000 viewer average. Based on the TNA ratings that have come out this year, I would guess that TNA probably triples that number. So that just shows the importance of TNA to the station. Interestingly, and TNT averages 813,000. So usually you see, and TBS 731,000. So usually you see wrestling like far exceeding the average numbers. Here they're like, depending on what it is, I guess the secondary programming on TNT would be far lower, but that would be on the weekend. TBS, even their Dynamite show, depending on the weekend, so on, maybe even a little bit below this number, right? So that's interesting. USA Network, so 603,000 viewer average. So obviously that's Raw is 2.5 times that amount. And unfortunately, we don't get the ratings for AAA from TUTN, but that network averages 86,000 in prime time. So that actually might be a pretty good rating that we're just not aware of at the moment.
Interesting, very interesting. Who's kind of looking good and maybe who's not so looking so good. Some of those channels there, but let's do your favorite thing ever, and possibly our favorite guests ever, favorite wrestler, which is interesting to kind of start off here and there.
Yes, so Omos is going to Pro Wrestling Noah, and of course Brett Lauderdale of GCW would love to book him. But I was actually right before this announcement, I was looking at like Cage Match, and I was like, what has he been doing? The last year, 2 years, and like he only, like, in terms of singles matches, he was just wrestling 2 people in WWE when they had used him, but it had been a while. So obviously a smart move if there's a booking fee and so on, all the better. But B, like, that would be a really great place for him to work. Next, I don't know if you've seen this show. I don't necessarily recommend it. Have you seen Beast Games on Amazon?
No, haven't seen
Okay.
any of that.
You're not missing much, but Mr. Beast, the YouTuber, there's 1,000 people that start out in the competition, and then they get wheedled down through whatever means and so on. So there was somebody on the show named Twana, and it said wrestler. So I didn't recognize her, and I just Googled, and it's the Beast. So I think that was just a coincidence, but the Beast from Women of Wrestling, who was their champion and hasn't been on in a while. So best of luck to her. The show in the Poughkeepsie that we've been talking about for a while, the ACW Presents Poughkeepsie Rumble, that show will be on January 4th. So 828 tickets distributed thus far. ASC Wrestling in North Carolina, they had some nice coverage on the Charlotte Observer for an article that was talking about AEW's upcoming show, where it said, from homegrown promotions like Charles Black-owned ASC Wrestling, which launches its own episodic series on YouTube on January 9th.
Are you interested in Omos being a part of Pro Wrestling Noah? It seems like pretty kind of an interesting little dynamic they got going there, that they wanted him so badly, but kind of cool freak show kind of guy.
Yeah, I think like the American tall, well, actually, I mean, he's not from American necessarily, but obviously from an American promotion, monster, quote unquote, talent, like larger than life and so on. Like, that's always appealing in Japan. I don't know so much of the rhythm of Noah these days. Obviously, they're in a pretty good position under Abima, but it's always more appealing to like see those matches like in isolation, like from Japan, and like see how talents are doing that haven't necessarily had the chance to break out here in the US.
So let's wrap this bad boy up and head towards the plugs. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at 2manpowertrip Lavie. What about you?
Follow me on X, Lavie Mark, LAVIE MARG. Check out the long form articles on lioncubjobsearch.com. Check out our LinkedIn group, The Business of the Business. We are the official business podcast of PW Ponderings, and we are distributed by the Creative Control Network.
All right. Thank you, Lavie. Thank you, everybody out there, for listening. We'll see you right back here next week for a little business of the business. We'll see you next week, folks.